We're going to be talking today about what's in it for you. What's in it for me? It's the title, 9 Reasons to Play Nycos RPG. And pure and simple, roleplay games are a very customized and very specialized form of play. And it isn't for everyone, but it certainly is for a lot of people. And the one advantage of using the Nycos RPG mechanism is that you, as a storyteller, and you, as a player, define what is roleplay. You define what are the types of skills you want to advance. You build the story in your character by the actions that you take and the skills that you learn. And this provides you with way more agency than perhaps any other roleplay system out there. Now, a secondary function that really is valuable is that player advancement is no longer in the hands of the storyteller. The game master is not the person who determines your advancement and your progression through the game, because you, as a player, determine what is considered to be useful or valuable, and you play advancements as you play the mechanic of the game. So every skill you choose to advance is something that is what you have chosen to do, and it's not enforced or pushed on you or even controlled or limited by the storyteller. Now, in the case of the Nycos RPG mechanism and those people who are playing in the Dark Shards campaigns that I'm running, or that are playing in systems that are associated, you have arguably one of the greatest stories of a spiraling timeline, in that you have 50 years. They're very nearly 50 years. It will be, by the time I'm a year older, it will be over 50 years worth of play experience and Easter eggs that are left over for you in the game. That means that your pathway through the story will endeavor to bring you into legacy of history and mysteries from the last 5 decades. Now, in terms of game time, that's 12,000 years in actual play time. So it means that, pardon me, you have the ability to actually change things. And what you decide in game does mean something in the global term of the game campaign. What this offers, therefore, and I'm sorry for not using my lens here properly, I've got to remember, and I apologize for focusing in another direction. But the idea is that what you do means something. You carry weight into the future with every action that you take in game. As a matter of fact, your existence in the game has lasting value simply because other players in the future will be playing off of the actions and decisions that you've made in the world at this point, and therefore there is an ongoing legacy for every player. It's an unspoken but contractual, if you will, personal reaction with anybody that plays in my games, that the things that you do will matter and they will have a lasting effect. Another thing that goes into this is that, especially now as we're going into this 9th iteration, there are places that you can travel to, things that you can do, where you will discover things and you will be naming them for all of Nycos' future histories, because you are the finder and you are the discoverer. You get to name them. So this can be kind of a heady experience if you haven't done this before, but my players that have been playing for a long time know that the decisions that they make about what something is called tend to stick and expand over time. Well, all of this means that you have nearly 12,000 years of Easter eggs to unearth as you travel across the landmass that is the world of Nycos. There are more things to be discovered, more things that exist in heaven and earth, Horatio, as the saying goes, than are thought of in your imaginations. But in this case, your imaginations play into it and you help to create that. And then one of the major long-term benefits of being a part of the world of Nycos is that you, as a player, are becoming a part of a long-term lifetime legacy, and your stories will be told throughout all time. And I can't state how clearly that is an appealing thing for someone who has been an adventurer. Certainly, they talk about the songs of old being written about the heroes. Well, in this case, the players actually do their own creativity and create their own songs and their own poems and chants and artwork and so on that become a part of the legacy of the world of Nycos. And in terms of the world of Nycos, the one thing that it has going over every other game system out there is that the players, you sitting at the table making the decisions, are the legacy of the world of Nycos. Things that happen in your bailiwick, things that are brought to the table during your play, will change the world forever, and others will know about it over time. So that really is the short version of what's in it for you. I'm sure there are many others. I've got several fans that watch the show, so if you have a chance, please put in a comment about what benefits you've had as a role player in the world of Nycos, and let me know if there's any other new benefits you'd like to see added, and we can negotiate towards that. So in that meantime, let's move on to the next section. Now, we've been talking about the Launchpad the last few sessions, and we are down to the point of discussing the concept of chainstorming. And as I mentioned before, the Launchpad is really the backbone behind the world of Nycos, and it is the realization of my life's goal to share with everyone the mechanism that lets me create what like I do and will allow you the opportunity to dynamically change your world to match what you want from it. So let's talk a little bit about chainstorming, shall we? So chainstorming, I consider to be the storm before the calm. You know, one of the biggest challenges of our lives is deciding on a course. Where do we want to go? What do we want to accomplish? What do we want to bring to the world that hasn't been seen before, that is uniquely ours? And many of us don't really start focusing our lives until we get a good picture of that. So chainstorming is the methodology to literally throw the mud at the wall, so to speak, figure out what sticks, and then from that create the framework for your progression through life. So we're going to talk about what this really means. Now, everyone's probably familiar with the idea of a brainstorm, that you sit with a blank piece of paper, let your imagination wander, and just start writing down items that seem to suit what you're trying to build towards. You make these visionary statements, these prognostications and such during a brainstorming session, but they tend to be scattershot in a negative way. They're so broadly spaced that they're fundamentally collectively useless, and it takes a keen mind to focus back in on what you're trying to accomplish. So chainstorming is like a brainstorm, but it's literally a scattershot with an impact on your life. In other words, you've got to grab a hold of all the things you're wanting to accomplish and line them up in terms that make sense by linking them. And this is where the chainstorm comes from. So as you start down a pathway of, I want to, travel the world. So yeah, you're going to travel the world, but how are you going to travel? Is it going to be by car, or is it going to be by airplane? Are we going to be carrying fuel? Are we going to be winging it? What is the mechanism? And by coming up with different pieces of that process, we give ourselves the opportunity to really put a handle on what it is we're trying to do, and then isolate and focus out the pieces that are already sort of linked, so that therefore we're actually picking up links of chain and pushing them around on the table, so to speak, in a virtual way to build a course for our success. Now you can think of it another way too, and that is sometimes when we brainstorm, it's just word association. You just put out a word, and then you think about other words that might be associated with it, and you link them together and see how they connect together and try to find a place. Well, this is like that, but this is actually meaningful thought soup. So you're not going to just toss anything onto a chain storm. You're going to toss the pieces that are either a link in the chain or describe a part of the links of the chain that haven't been defined yet. So therefore, you're not being arbitrary. You're being dedicated and sincere in the course pathway that you're building. So it's like a word association game, except it's a word association plus. You're going to be bringing into the mechanism things that have worked for you in the past, for example, that you can point to and say, it's going to be like this, and so on. And by grabbing these various pieces of older, for example, chain links that do work together, you're actually short-circuiting and therefore increasing the speed and effectiveness of this process. Now, there are some rules about chain storming, one of which is that you can just spout nonsense if you want. But it's important to note that spitting nonsense onto a table, while it does generate emotional juices, sometimes maybe it triggers a course of thought, nonetheless you want to do so sensibly, because you don't want to be burning or wasting any of your time on things that really are non-useful. Now, we have to be careful with this, because this is also your one portion of your life path where you have permission to fantasize. Now, I know where many of your minds just went, and yes, get them out of the gutter. We're not talking about that kind of fantasy here. We're talking about the gee whiz of what if we had unlimited funds, or what if we had a means to the travel that we can't get to that right now. These are all things that give us the opportunity to create potential links that we haven't even considered. I'm reminded that in a few sessions recently, I've had huge breakthroughs because I've realized that I can start working with OPM, and I'll explain OPM at a later point. But the idea is that you can actually operate your business if you are introducing other people to revenue streams that they haven't considered, and then supporting yourself by putting those things onto the same track as your chain storm, if that makes sense. It's mainly, you have to learn to be non-judgmental. If you come up with an idea that might work, it should go on the list, even if it's not probable, even if it might be difficult, even if it might take some extra time. All of these things shouldn't be judgments that counter the idea, but they should be instead linked to the chain itself, so that you will realize that this part has a burden, we need to collect these pieces to be able to make it work and such. And by doing it that way, you end up with almost an anagram type style of event building, a plot building, because you're bringing the pieces that make sense and linking them together well in advance of requiring them, so that you are on spot with what you're trying to accomplish. Now, this also means that you need to entertain those things that are impossible. Now, what do I mean when I say entertain? I'm not saying that you put it on the list and say, if we don't get this, then we're done, we're canceling. Instead, what you're doing is you're saying, this is something that would be a possibility. There's no such thing as impossible, because if you can entertain the thought, that means there's at least some ground for conceiving of the thought, and therefore you're giving weight to your own permission, as mentioned before, to create the fantasy. And that means literally everything is on the table. There's no limitations to what could be included, as long as it makes sense with the other pieces and you find ways to put them online with each other. So, in essence, what we're talking about is a system where there is no dream too small, nor goal unattainable, because by realizing that you can micromanage each of the chain pieces into its own particular place in the line, you're actually building your domino. Remember, we talked yesterday about the domino principle, and you want to get your domino stack out there early and established, so that you can know when each piece is being leveraged against each other, to the point of causing the advancement of the whole together. So Just realize that the chain storm is a highly effective part of this process and is not to be overlooked or ignored, and we'll go more into how it can be used next time. Alrighty, so now we're going to take a minute and talk about when you are a game master, what tools do you bring to the table that you can use? And so we're going to be speaking of the Game Master's Toolbox. And in this case, we're going to talk about the value of the pregnant pause. Sometimes a pause in a game session or in a conversation or even a presentation like this can be unnerving. You know, we get so used to having noise that we forget how important it is sometimes to concentrate on what is being said and the way it's being said, and not just that it's being said. That being said, the idea here is that you want to create a way to improve the impact of your narrative by drawing attention to specific points, by focusing on your rhythm and pattern so that you are able to draw attention to a specific point in the narrative. Now, there are some benefits to this, of course. It demonstrates thoughtfulness because many of us think that the reason, arguably the sole reason for a moment of silence is that contemplation that comes along with that quiet. This idea of silence being a watchword for thoughtfulness isn't necessarily true. We also use it to try to buy time to think up something else to say. But the idea here is that we want to demonstrate our thoughtfulness, usually by equating or conflating that very idea of silence with a gesture or a concept that gives the viewer, the listener, the chance to contemplate what you are trying to convey. Now, it does also provide the viewer and the reader to allow time for their reconsideration. So if you said something and you said it too quickly, sometimes it's best to repeat it again much more slowly and with the influence of impact of pausing in the process. So, as I just said, imagine this. When you say something, if you give the viewer or the listener the chance to think about what you said, this is considered reconsideration because they've already made their mind up before you finished the first time. Now, obviously, pregnant pauses and stops in a conversation also increases either the comedic or dramatic outcome of that statement or that interchange. Because when we are glib and quick-witted and we respond quickly to influences, that's one type of humor. But another is to draw something out, focus on the oddness of it, maybe change our voice a little bit, make it seem a little bit like we might be curious. All of these things provide a way to utilize the pregnant pause. But think about this. Sometimes when we are talking, we aren't sure whether the other person is hearing us at all. You might be listening to the words I'm saying or letting the audio tape run, but you're not necessarily listening. So listen to this part specifically. I want to keep you on the same page, so I'm going to slow down. I'm going to draw attention in particular to the point that I'm trying to make, and I'm going to let it sit in your mind for a moment. Almost to the point of you being uncomfortable with the silence. Now, the reasons to do this is that you need to be able to manage your tempo, your timing, your accuracy and information, and by slowing down and speaking intentionally and focusing on the spaces as much as on the words, you create a much more effective communication skill. A final point about this is that it also provides the opportunity for the others to see you contemplating their input. Quite often, when other people are talking and I'm in the conversation with them, I will be the one who causes a pause after they've spoken. And this is in part for 2 or 3 reasons. Number one reason is I'm digesting the information. I'm ensuring I'm showing respect to their position because I'm contemplating what it might mean and what its ramifications might be. And most important, I'm giving them the realization that I value their opinion and therefore I'm going to consider it as we go forward in the conversation. And this last one, I think is really the most important, and that is you need to resist and reduce the talk-over effect. In our world today, there are many people who, when they get into a conversation, are so busy building the things that they're wanting to say that they're not even registering the words of the person with whom they're communicating. And I want this to be really clear. If you're having a conversation with me, what you say matters. What you are providing as an opinion means something to me. Now, there are those people who, of course, would respond and say, well, sometimes a person's just being a troll or they're being obnoxious or whatever. Well, I'm telling you, I'm looking right at you right now, and I'm telling you that I enjoy and implore you to share your opinions about the things I speak about, because it's important that the words I'm using are being accepted and heard and are being accepted with the intent that I'm providing them with. So, when you consider your conversation pattern in the future, do try to put your focus on your pauses, because the silence is the music of the conversation. Alrighty, thank you for all of this. This has been Jonathan Albin. This is this is NycosRPG, and this has been Game Master's Toolbox. I will see you all again on a later episode. Do remember every night we're on air generally at 11 p.m. Pacific time, and also watch for our game on Saturday, 9 a.m. We will put up a notice about that as soon as we know that we're confirmed for that date. So Saturday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. Again, this is Jonathan Albin, Game Master J. Thanks for being here, and I'll see you next time.